Considering the rising costs and uncertainties, how do the Amish preserve food to last for extended periods? In times of inflation and power outages, many of us feel unprepared, but the Amish have perfected simple methods to preserve food without modern technology. These techniques might be the solution to building your own reliable food supply. Let's explore their secrets. Imagine having a natural refrigerator like the Amish that doesn't need electricity and keeps food fresh for months. This is called root cellaring, an old way of storing food that they've improved over time. They use underground spaces to keep fruits and vegetables cool and fresh throughout the year. Root cellars are important to the Amish because they live simply and do things themselves. To build one, they choose a spot with good drainage so water doesn't cause mold or rot. They pick shaded areas or north-facing slopes to keep the temperature steady. The cellar is usually dug 10 to 12 feet deep into the ground or a hillside. This depth helps maintain a cool temperature even in warm weather. They use strong materials like stone or wood for the walls to maintain the right temperature. Stone walls absorb and release heat slowly, keeping the cellar cool. The floor is often dirt or gravel to control moisture levels. This natural flooring helps prevent food from drying out by maintaining high humidity, which is important for keeping produce fresh and crisp. Ventilation is key for root cellars. The Amish install 2 vents, one near the ceiling to let out warm air and one near the floor to bring in cool air. This natural airflow balances temperature and humidity inside. They cover the vents with screens to keep out pests like insects and rodents. By adjusting the vents based on weather conditions, the Amish are able to maintain the temperature consistently. Regular checks are a family task. They look for spoiled food or signs of pests and remove anything bad right away. This prevents the spread of spoilage to other foods. If needed, they adjust ventilation or add moisture with pans of water or damp cloths. This careful attention keeps their produce fresh all winter. Root cellars help the Amish preserve food without modern refrigerators. This saves energy and helps them stay self-sufficient. By using the Earth's natural coolness, they have a steady food supply through the winter months. This method shows how they live simply and work with nature.
This is about as far over as I want to go on the building, because if you guys remember when we put our water pipe in, the water pipe's right about here, and I don't want to be able to access that anytime that I want. I don't want it under the concrete, so I'm going to pull this in a little bit, make sure that the water pipe's opened up right there so I can get to it, and pretty soon I'm going to show you guys we're going to have to tap into the lines and get them turned on and everything once I finish hooking this water up. So there's a lot of intricate stuff that's going to be going on that was all part of this build that you guys are going to want to be paying attention to.
While root cellaring keeps fresh produce preserved, the Amish also rely on canning to store foods for years. This method allows them to enjoy their harvests all year. During harvest time, families often come together to share the work. By sealing food in glass jars and heating them to kill bacteria, they prevent spoilage and keep the food's nutritional value. The vacuum seal ensures the contents stay fresh without refrigeration. They use 2 main canning techniques, water bath canning and pressure canning. Depending on the food's acidity, high-acid foods like fruits, tomatoes, pickles, jams, and jellies are suitable for water bath canning. Low-acid foods like vegetables, meats, poultry, and seafood require pressure canning to reach higher temperatures needed to eliminate harmful bacteria. In water bath canning, they start by washing and preparing the produce, often fresh from their gardens. They sterilize jars and lids by boiling them in water. The food is then packed into the jars, leaving space at the top for expansion during processing. Air bubbles are removed by gently tapping the jars or using a utensil. They wipe the rims clean before sealing the jars with lids and bands. The jars are placed in a large pot filled with boiling water, heated over wood-burning stoves common in Amish kitchens. The water must cover the jars by at least an inch. Processing time varies by food type and jar size. After processing, jars are carefully removed and set on a towel or rack to cool undisturbed. As they cool, a vacuum seal forms. They test the seal by pressing the lid to make sure it doesn't flex. For pressure canning, the process is similar but uses a pressure canner to reach temperatures above boiling. This is necessary for low-acid foods to ensure safety. The food is prepared and packed into jars, just like in water bath canning. The jars are placed in the pressure canner with water and the canner is heated. Pressure builds inside, raising the temperature. They monitor the pressure carefully, adjusting the heat to keep it at the right level for the required time. After processing, the canner is allowed to cool before opening. The jars are then removed and left to cool, forming a vacuum seal. This method ensures that low-acid foods are safe to store without refrigeration. The Amish follow strict canning practices to ensure safety. They pay close attention to cleanliness, temperatures, and processing times. This careful approach allows them to maintain a nutritious food supply throughout the year. By combining traditional knowledge and care, they preserve their harvests effectively while staying true to their values. In addition to preserving food, the Amish turn it into tangy, probiotic-rich treats through fermentation. This method not only extends shelf life but also boosts health. It enhances flavors and textures important to their cooking. They start with fresh ingredients from their gardens, grown without chemicals. For vegetables like cabbage for sauerkraut or cucumbers for pickles, they wash and prepare them carefully. The vegetables are mixed with salt, about 2% of their weight. The salt draws out water to create a brine. This brine prevents harmful bacteria while helping good bacteria grow. Sometimes they add herbs or spices for extra flavor, using traditional family recipes. The salted vegetables are placed in crocks or jars. They make sure the vegetables stay submerged in the brine by using weights like clean stones or wooden discs. The containers are covered to keep out dust and insects but allow gases from fermentation to escape. They might use cloth covers or special lids designed for this purpose. For dairy products like yogurt and cheese, they use fresh milk from their cows or goats. The milk is heated to remove harmful bacteria and then cooled. Specific cultures are added for yogurt, and the mixture is kept warm for fermentation. Cheese making involves adding cultures and rennet, causing the milk to curdle. The curds are processed and aged according to traditional methods passed down through generations. Fermented foods are rich in probiotics, which support digestion and improve gut health. Fermentation also increases vitamins and breaks down complex compounds in grains and beans, making minerals easier to absorb. The Amish value these health benefits as a natural way to stay healthy without relying on modern medicine. When fermentation is complete, the food is stored in cool places like root cellars or spring houses. These environments slow bacterial activity, extending the shelf life. Properly fermented and stored foods can last for months, providing access to their produce throughout the year. This approach keeps them healthy and supports their self-sufficient lifestyle. Besides fermenting, the Amish use drying to preserve food without refrigeration. Drying removes water, preventing bacteria and mold from growing. This simple method fits their lifestyle of self-reliance. They dry fruits, vegetables, herbs, and meats, giving them plenty to eat all year. For fruits like apples, pears, peaches, and berries, they use sun drying. They pick ripe fruit and wash it carefully to remove dirt and insects. Then they slice the fruit into thin pieces so it dries faster. The slices are placed on clean racks or screens, often handmade from wood by Amish craftsmen. These racks are set in sunny spots with good air circulation. To keep bugs away, they cover the fruit with fine mesh or cloth. The fruit stays in the sun during the day. At night, they bring it inside or cover it to protect from moisture. The drying process can take several days, depending on the weather. They check the fruit often, turning the slices to ensure even drying. Once most of the water is removed, the fruit becomes firm and leathery, but still slightly flexible. This texture indicates it's safe from bacteria and mold. For herbs and leafy vegetables, they use air drying. They harvest herbs like mint, basil, thyme, and oregano early in the morning when their oils are strongest. After washing and gently drying the herbs, they tie them into small bunches. These bundles are hung upside down in warm, dry areas like attics, barns, or special drying sheds where air circulates freely. Keeping the herbs out of direct sunlight helps retain their flavor and color. When the weather isn't suitable for sun drying or when they need to speed up the process, they use dehydrators or ovens powered by wood stoves. Food is laid out in single layers on trays. They carefully monitor the heat to avoid overdrying, which can cause the food to lose nutrients and flavor. This method allows them to dry food even during rainy or cold seasons. Once the food is fully dried, they let it cool before storing. This prevents moisture from forming, which could spoil the food. The dried food is packed into airtight containers like glass jars, cloth bags, or wooden boxes sealed with beeswax. These containers are stored in cool, dark, and dry places like root cellars or pantries. Properly dried and stored food can last for months, or even over a year. Drying food makes it lighter and easier to store and transport. This is helpful when sharing within their community or taking food to the fields. Dried foods retain most nutrients like carbohydrates and minerals. The food can be rehydrated by soaking or cooking or eaten as is for tasty snacks. By mastering drying, the Amish make the most of their harvests. This ensures they have food during times of scarcity. This tradition supports their self-sufficient way of life and strengthens their community by passing down knowledge to younger generations.
Have you ever gone out and got a drink and it has those dehydrated lemons, limes, or any fruit, or even in a dessert? This is how you make them. All you need is a fruit of your choice. In this case, I'm going with a lemon. Make sure they're washed, and then all you have to do is thinly slice them, making sure that they're all the same size. Lay them out on a dehydrating rack. This one right here is the Lavelli dehydrating. It's the same as the meal prep containers I use. Make sure they're not sitting on top of one another. Then take them over to the dehydrator itself, stack it up and make sure it's locked in nice and tight. Turn it on, set it to 50 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be dehydrating for 18 hours. This can also be done in the oven, same temperature and same amount of time. Depending on which way you do it, it's always best to check them halfway through. This has been about 6 hours and they're looking nice and crispy. But I did end up leaving these in for 18 hours just because it's easy to do overnight. And what we're left with is these beautiful crispy and slightly chewy lemons or any fruit of your choice, which has so much flavor. Once that's done, carefully pick them off the rack and then place them into a sterilized jar or any clean container. And these will last up to 1 year, stored in a cool, dark place.
If you want to add rich, smoky flavors to meats and fish while keeping them fresh longer, smoking, a tradition among the Amish, might be ideal. Smoking flavors and preserves meats, fish, and cheeses by exposing them to wood smoke. The smoke adds a unique taste and contains natural compounds that fight bacteria. The heat helps dry the food, extending its shelf life. Amish communities build smokehouses using wood and stone. They use hardwoods like hickory, oak, maple, or fruit woods like apple and cherry, sourced from their forests. These woods burn slowly, creating flavorful smoke that enhances the taste of the food. Before smoking, they cure meats and fish with a mixture of salt, sugar, and spices to draw out moisture and enhance flavor. They might use herbs like thyme, rosemary, or black pepper from their gardens. Depending on the food, curing takes from a few hours to several days. During smoking, food is hung or placed on racks inside the smokehouse to ensure even exposure to smoke. They manage airflow and temperature by adjusting vents, relying on traditional skills and experience rather than modern thermometers. Keeping the temperature steady is important to avoid overcooking or drying out the food too much. They use two smoking methods. Cold smoking keeps the temperature below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This method mainly adds flavor without cooking the food. It can take several days and is used for items like ham or bacon that will be cooked later. Hot smoking uses temperatures between 165 and 185 degrees Fahrenheit. This method cooks and flavors the food, producing ready-to-eat items like smoked chicken, fish, and sausages in just a few hours. Smoking not only preserves food, but also enhances flavor, making smoked items special in Amish cooking. The process often involves families working together, strengthening community bonds, and passing down skills from one generation to the next. Along with smoking, the Amish use salt curing to preserve meats and vegetables naturally. Salt curing extends shelf life without refrigeration by using salt, sometimes mixed with sugar and spices. This removes moisture and prevents bacteria from growing. They prepare meats by trimming excess fat and rubbing them with the salt mixture, covering all surfaces thoroughly. The meats are stored in cool places like cellars or smokehouses. The curing time depends on the size of the meat, ranging from weeks to months. During this time, they turn the meat regularly and reapply salt when needed to ensure even curing. Wet curing, or brining, involves soaking food in a solution of water, salt, and sometimes sugar or spices. The food stays submerged for days or weeks. Large wooden barrels or vats are commonly used, stored in cool environments to maintain quality. After curing, meats are rinsed to remove excess salt and then air-dried in well-ventilated spaces. This prepares them for storage or consumption. These methods ensure a reliable food supply throughout the year, reducing waste and making the most of their harvests and livestock. Salt curing also brings families together during harvest and butchering seasons to share the work and knowledge of these traditional techniques. This helps them stay self-sufficient while living in harmony with nature. In addition to salt curing, the Amish use fat sealing, also known as confit, to preserve meat. This method extends the shelf life of meats like duck, goose, and pork without refrigeration. They choose high-quality meats from their own farms. The meat is seasoned with herbs, spices, and salt, often using ingredients from their gardens. Once seasoned, the meat is placed in a heavy pot and fully submerged in rendered fat, usually from the same type of animal. It is cooked slowly at low temperatures for several hours. This gentle cooking keeps the meat tender and moist while killing bacteria. After cooking, the meat is transferred into clean containers like ceramic crocks or glass jars. The rendered fat is poured over the meat, creating an airtight seal. This blocks air and microorganisms, allowing the meat to stay fresh when stored in cool, dark places like cellars. When the meat is needed, it can be removed from the fat, reheated, and used in recipes. The leftover fat is not wasted, it is reused for cooking other foods. This showcases the Amish value of reducing waste and making the most of their resources. Fat sealing aligns with their focus on sustainability and self-reliance. It allows them to enjoy flavorful, tender meat throughout the year without modern refrigeration.
Today we're going to confit some beef in beef tallow. Some of you guys might be familiar with a French recipe for duck confit where they add a bunch of seasonings and you can do all that fancy stuff too. Today we're going to keep it simple with beef tallow and ground beef. So all we're going to really do is throw some fat and beef in the oven for a few hours, and that's going to stay in the fridge for, I would say, up to a month, and it can probably even stay, at room temperature for a long period of time. And if you want to, I'm sure you could heat it up again like a month from now and then re-sterilize it, and then it will be good for longer.
This is if you want this to taste a little better. But if you're hungry, if you're actually in a survival situation and you haven't eaten in a couple days, anything is going to taste good. So all we need to do is just cover this with fat as much as is needed. So I had to melt a little extra tallow just to cover the top. And this layer of fat is basically going to protect the meat. Put this in the fridge freezer, it'll solidify, and this will be good for, up to a month.
Besides fat sealing, the Amish use ash preservation to keep certain foods fresh longer. This method helps them store eggs and root vegetables using clean wood ash to create a protective layer. It is especially useful during winter months when fresh produce is scarce. For preserving eggs, they select clean, unwashed eggs from their hens. They avoid washing to keep the natural protective coating intact. The eggs are placed in boxes or crocks and fully covered with fine, sifted wood ash from untreated hardwoods. The ash fills spaces around the eggs, blocking air and moisture. This keeps the eggs fresh for several months, sometimes up to a year. These containers are stored in cool, dry places like cellars or pantries. For root vegetables like carrots, beets, and turnips, they use a similar process. Vegetables are gently cleaned but not washed, as moisture can cause spoilage. They place the vegetables in boxes or barrels with layers of wood ash in between to prevent them from touching. The ash absorbs moisture and keeps pests away, slowing down bacteria and mold growth. By using wood ash, a natural byproduct of their wood-burning stoves, they extend the shelf life of important foods without refrigeration or chemicals. This sustainable method aligns with their resourceful way of life and ensures they have essential supplies even during harsh winters.
Your eggs and wood ashes. It's so simple, and wood ashes are such a common thing to have, at least definitely in the time period. And really the best, really a stunning idea here is that with their experiments, they had a success rate of 80%. Only 20% of the eggs went bad after 8 months. It does have a little bit of a problem in that the eggs would take on a bit of an ashy taste, so there's a little bit of disadvantage there.
The Amish also use traditional pickling methods to preserve food while adding bold flavors. Pickling keeps vegetables, fruits, and even proteins fresh by soaking them in vinegar solutions or fermenting them in salty brine. This prevents bacteria from growing, making it a reliable way to preserve food year-round. For vinegar pickling, they start with fresh produce like cucumbers, beets, onions, peppers, and sometimes eggs. The produce is washed thoroughly and sometimes lightly blanched. They pack the items into sterilized glass jars with spices, herbs, and aromatics like dill, garlic, mustard seeds, and peppercorns. Many of these ingredients come from their own gardens. They make a pickling solution by boiling vinegar, water, salt, and sugar, following family recipes. Apple cider vinegar, often made from their apples, is popular for its rich flavor. The hot solution is poured over the food in the jars, ensuring everything is submerged. The jars are sealed and sometimes processed in a water bath canner to create a tight seal. In fermented pickling, they use a salt brine to encourage natural fermentation. This method produces probiotic-rich foods that are good for digestion. Sauerkraut and traditional pickles are made this way, using simple ingredients and natural processes. Pickling not only preserves food, but also adds nutritional value. Fermented pickles contain probiotics that promote gut health. This method allows them to use excess produce effectively, reducing waste. Pickled eggs are a favorite treat made by soaking hard-boiled eggs in flavorful brine. Beet juice might be added for color, along with spices to enhance taste. When stored in a cool, dark place, properly pickled foods can last for years. They label jars with contents and dates to ensure the food is used while at its best quality. This careful attention ensures their pickled foods remain safe, flavorful, and ready to enjoy whenever needed. By integrating these traditional Amish preservation methods into your own food storage practices, you can create a sustainable and reliable pantry that withstands modern challenges. If you found these tips helpful, make sure to check out our other videos on sustainable survival and prepping. Stay prepared and stay safe.